I don't know if you guys are all like me, a broke college student, and finding just a few dollars is hard to come by, but I certainly wish that lobster was still considered as a poor man's protein today as it was in the 1700s. Overall, lobsters are interesting animals in which make great food. First, I'm going to talk about the vast history of lobster. Second, I'm going to talk about lobster itself. And third, I'm going to talk about how it is prepared. So, a lobster actually has kind of a unique anatomy. Its brain is where we would consider to be its throat. It has teeth in its stomach. Its kidney is kind of where we would consider to be its head. And they actually are kind of similar to us in a way, how they have a dominant claw, just like we have a dominant hand. And when we store lobsters in tanks, like at restaurants and stuff, people have to keep their claws banded. And this isn't just to protect people dealing with lobsters. Lobsters can also become cannibalistic when they are close in a confined space with one another. And lobsters kind of typically have a lifespan of about 45 to 50 years. So there are many ways to prepare lobster, but it all starts off with the basic facets of boiling the lobster in order to get it cooked. So you start off by filling up a pot with water. And finally, once you get it full, you take the pot over and you go ahead and you start to boil it. And finally, once your water gets to the perfect temperature boiling point, you have to take your lobster and remember to keep the bands on it when you put it in. So you take the lobster, you put it in to cook, and you leave it in there. It kind of can range from times of how long it takes, but ultimately the best key to know when it's done is when the lobster actually turns red. So finally, once it turns red, you know that your lobster has been cooked. So once it's done cooked, and there's many different ways that people like to consume lobster. You can have lobster as just lobster, where you take tools and you crack the lobster in order to eat it and pull out the lobster meat. But you can also consume lobster in the very famous form of lobster rolls. Now, there are many different types of lobster rolls, including Maine lobster rolls, New England lobster rolls, and Connecticut lobster rolls. But they're all basically just like a toasted bun with lobster in it, which is basically the facets of a lobster roll. Many other people like to consume lobster as lobster mac and cheese, or as other forms like lobster egg benedict. So, as I mentioned earlier, lobster used to be known as the poor man's protein, and this is mainly because during colonial days there was such a huge abundance of lobster, as it would basically just wash ashore. This caused them to feed lobster to slaves, prisoners, use it as fish bait, fertilizer, and people even referred to lobster as the cockroaches of the seas. Lobster really didn't become a delicacy that it is today until canned food came around, when people started to can lobster. As you can imagine, this didn't taste as good and people preferred fresh lobster instead. And this caused fresh lobster to become scarce, so restaurants started to mark up the price of lobster, slowly making it become the delicacy that it is today. Overall, lobster is filled with history, unique body features, and can be prepared in many different ways and still be the tasty delicacy that it is today. If you happen to have saved a little bit of money between textbooks and tuition, I suggest that you head on down over to Smack Shack in Minneapolis and try some of the lobster rolls for yourself.